All right, you are now tuned in to the Rotated Views podcast. I am your host, Jimmylee Velez. I'm here with Gabe. That's right, folks. It's just me and Gabe on this episode 211, New School. In this episode, the crew covers topics that range from virtual schooling, scheduling, learning/teaching, the coronavirus, and much more. We wrap the episode up with quotes from Alan Watts and Aristotle. Guys, if you're new, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to download and subscribe. We drop a new episode every Tuesday morning for your listening pleasure. Kicking things off, guys, thank you. We want to express our gratitude for the continued love and support. We're around 4.5 years now with the podcast. Yes. And you get kind of humbled from time to time, and it's funny the situation that we have going on right now, because we've come such a long way that it's odd that it's just me and Gabe right now, right? And a fun fact: Gabe and I made a promise to each other that even if it's just me and him, we will still do the podcast. And here we are, 4.5 years later. Possibly 5 years ago is when we made that promise, but 4.5 years later into the podcast, we're still sticking to our word. So very cool, and thank you, Gabe. I appreciate it, man.
Absolutely, man.
All right, so we're going to kick things off with the new school. So the situation is this, right? So obviously the coronavirus hit later last year, and then it kind of really affected us in the beginning of 2020. Yes. And 2020 has been a year that is, the most bizarre, strangest things I think, we've ever encountered when it comes to, I guess, how life...
Societal rule.
Yeah, there's how life just is, and how do you interact with people, and how you approach things, and how you buy things and purchase things. Just everyday living is completely different in under a year. And that's what makes it weird and bizarre, because it's such dramatic change.
That such a small period of time.
Yes, exactly. And so there's a lot of changes that good and bad. And this is kind of what we wanted to talk about, right? And we've always saw schooling as, a particular thing. And when I say schooling, in particular, I'm thinking, like grade school, elementary school, middle school, high school, that kind of thing. And there's folks out there who are typically, their deal is homeschooling. And so they're just cruising right along right now, I would imagine, because not much change.
That's the status quo for pretty much.
And so they're kind of ahead of the curve, if that's what you want to look at it. And then there's people who either send their kids away for schooling. And there's people who, kind of like myself and my wife, we drop our kids off at school and we pick them up from school. And I have a now first grader. But so it's a lot different now, right? And so we kind of just wanted to talk about the new school, but we also kind of want to reminisce on kind of how we remembered schooling, or what our experience was now, because it's not to say that it's wrong, it's just that it's different, right? And so to us, it's just, that wasn't our experience, but it is now going to be our kids and our grandkids. I'm assuming this has changed forever. I'm not sure. I don't know. Right now, it seems like there's a lot of permanent things put in play right now, put in play.
At least rules that are indefinitely in play.
Yes. And so it's like, all right, well, this has changed forever. Which is also an odd thought. Especially with the schooling system has been going the same way for so long. It's been a huge hurdle, I guess, in terms of trying to acclimate not just certain grades, but like every single grade, it seems like at this point. And listen, don't get me wrong. I am one of those people who, calling for improvement and change in subject matter and what we're teaching our kids in schools and that kind of thing. This is a whole other beast, though. This is just the entire approach has changed. So anyway, one of the biggest things that for me I found heartbreaking, or wow, that's tough, is when I heard someone had to choose between their job or schooling their child. Everyone's in different situations, right? And every situation is going to come up, and that was just one of them. But I think that impacted me the most, just the thought of that, right? Because you have couples that are married with kids, you have couples that are separated with kids, you have single parents, who are, taking care of that entire role. And then you have family members who both parents work.
Yes.
Right. You have families, I should say, where just one person works, whether that's, whoever it is, doesn't matter. So they're kind of used to someone being home, so that's fine. Yeah.
Parent.
But that is not to say that that's an easy transition even for them.
Sure.
Because
then you're transitioning to
being
whatever the usual house stuff, but now you're a teacher or tutor or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably always helped in that regard, but now it's an all-day thing.
It's a full responsibility.
Yes.
Where before I think it was more partial responsibility.
Yes. You helped with the after-school part.
Yes, exactly, and help to get the homework done and the studying and all that jazz. And I think there's so much focus on these other things that we kind of lose, or at one point the sports and the extracurricular stuff just got lost. Isn't that interesting, right? Because you start thinking about like what is extra in life, and there's people with the financial crisis that was in the middle of all that, because there's a lot of people who lost jobs because of this whole this pandemic, and so you start to realize what's really important. What are the core things? You truly do need.
You gotta
right?
boil it down to the basics of it.
Yeah, and so all of a sudden, sports and all these other extracurriculars were secondary.
Well, and that's kind of been what the budget's always cut in that regard anyway. But now you can't even do that because just because of COVID in general, you can't be gathering around that kind of aspect nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just remember it like when I thought of school. For me growing up, sports was just a natural part of that, or extracurricular was a natural part of that. And so when you say school, you literally now mean just schooling, the educational part.
Yes.
Sports is like its own beast.
There's
like they have to handle it some other way, or the approach is totally different. And even if they do have sports this year, which I think eventually they'll figure it all out.
Sure.
I just think for right now we're still kind of in a mini panic mode.
Yes.
It's currently September. It'll be mid-September when this gets released, and there's no vaccination. There's no real end to this, and actually they're talking about the second wave coming on. And so and they're finding out new things about this so-called virus that is taking on different forms as it progresses, and it has different stages, and it starts making its own adjustments, and it's like, what is going on right now? And so you have that worry, right? But just to go back to the whole family situation, there's full-time parents who both work away from the home. I know me and my wife works about 35-40 minutes away from home, and I'm about an hour away from home, right? And so in opposite directions. And so it was a complete challenge for us, and still is. I mean, we're still in our first week, and so we're still figuring things out, and we're trying to see more so, because here's the thing, because you can come up with a solution or a proposed solution that you think is going to work, and you give it that first week or two, you realize this is not going to work. This is not sustainable, right? And so you got to start to figure other things out.
So what is the situation with, I guess, James is in first grade, I guess, right?
Yes.
So what is, is it all remote at this point? Like, what is...
Yeah, so his whole thing is all remote. We have someone that's able to do the work with him.
Okay.
And so we figured him out. And then obviously my younger son is not in school per se. He was in, like a nursery or whatever.
Okay. Like the pre... Whatever.
Yes, exactly.
The pre-pre.
Prior to that, yeah. But right now it's fine with his situation's fine with just the babysitter, because it's not affecting. Of course, the babysitter's like reading stuff with him and trying to teach him things, but it's not like a curriculum. Yes, exactly. There's no. You want to expand your child's brain no matter what, in a positive way when it comes to education. Anyway, so that's us. Okay. We have a couple plans, like a plan B, I should say, maybe a plan C, a very fuzzy plan C, I should say. Plan B is not 100% solid. I would say it's probably 70 to 80%. Okay. But it's like a direction you don't want to go, right? Okay. And then now you're facing real life decisions that have to be made that are going to affect us for however long this is going to seriously affect us. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's financially, whether it's relationship wise, it's not easy. So what we're kind of going based off of, because we've never experienced this before, was the tail end of his last semester when he was finishing off kindergarten. Okay. And believe it or not, he legit had like 2 to 4 hours worth of work every single day to complete. You know, and it was just like whatever it was, the last month or month and a half, whatever that was, to ride out. It might have been longer than that, and I apologize if it is. It might have been 3 months to ride out to finish his school year. So, and it was only a pass or fail. Obviously, he passed, but it was a very, very, very odd adjustment, because you got to understand, especially at that young age, we're prepping them. And I'm sure it's odd for everybody. I can only speak from my experience, though, right? And so we prepped him, you know, all these years for kindergarten, right? And what to expect and what you do. And I'm sure other parents do this for junior high and high school, and you're going to be switching classes. To that next level. Yes, whatever that next level is, you're kind of talking to your kid about what your experience is and what you think, and then whatever the materials or information that's, you know, bestowed upon you, you can then read through and then kind of explain and talk it through, right? And so you're talking your kid up with all this stuff, and it's the first time. I mean, James been in and out of or in school basically since he was a baby, so it wasn't real like a huge adjustment. The homework part, I think, was that was something he's never had, so he's learning all day throughout school. Because
there was always activities, I guess, if anything, before, but it wasn't really like school work per se.
Yes, exactly. And so once we finally feel like you find a flow, right, then the whole thing, because it takes more than a year. Give me a break, right? I mean, especially with a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, you know? And so we started feeling out like what our role was when I got home, and whoever got home first would start cooking, and then whoever came back, you know, whatever would start James with his homework. Like, we started to have like a flow. And once we started having that, and all of a sudden, like I said, everything kind of got jacked up. And again, we're a household of, you know, myself, my wife, so 2 parents. We're both working parents. To top it off, we're essential workers, meaning we didn't get laid off. We continued to work throughout the whole situation. We continue to work full time throughout the whole situation. Thank God we have jobs. We're very grateful for the opportunity and the opportunities that we continue to have, and we're embracing them. And like I said, we're very grateful for them. That being said, that doesn't mean it's easy, right? And so, you know, there's some people who have the opportunity to, you know, work from home, but work from home doesn't mean, you know, do the exact same thing you're doing at work just at home, right? Some people have like a way more laxed schedule when they're, quote, working from home. I mean, they're probably doing 50%, some even 25 to 30%, some maybe even lower. I don't know. But it kind of keeps a body in the seat, because it was more supposed to be a temporary thing. And so a lot of times there really wasn't a, quote, game plan, you know what I'm saying? And if there was, it was a very shallow one. There wasn't nothing really deep behind it, because when this whole thing started, they would just say there's going to be a month. So then it was like, all right, you could work remotely for a month. And then they said like, oh, another month. All right, let's just finish off the quarter. And then, you know,
slowly expanded from a couple weeks to months.
And then all of a sudden they're like, well, we're not as productive, right, as we once were. And so there's many businesses and companies that had to make adjustments, readjust, still bring people back in, and that kind of thing. And then you get the whole panic situation when it comes to work. And so, you know, being a quote essential worker, you're face to face with this literally every single day. And I only say that because, you know, that can really drive some people, you know, up a wall, because it's like, oh my goodness, like we're constant, and then stress people out, really. And so you have to really, there were so many adjustments that we had to make, and we're still making. And then all of a sudden, this whole, you know, the whole thing with the school situation was like, wow, what, you know, what happens when, you know, somebody is on a special project in a state where they know nobody, and they just bring their family just to be with their family, and it's like, now what do they do in those situations? And I'm sure people are out there listening, you have your solutions, but it just, you have to understand, there's people have different situations. and not someone could just quit their job and come home and just start teaching their child. It's a little bit more difficult and complex than just that. You got the single parents, or there's grandparents taking care of their grandchildren, and so they might not be as savvy with the computers, and they're trying to help and I'm sure they want to help, but it's frustrating, it's difficult, it's different, it's new.
Been in school for who knows how many years,
and they've been out of school for the last 50, 60 years, and it's like, all right, well, I mean, so one of the first things on the first days on social media all over the place was, well, getting started was a complete disaster, and everyone said that because by the time we started to get you kind of have like these web conferences and conference calls, and I don't care what anyone says. You can explain something all you want until you actually start physically doing it and like actually going through the process. More questions are going to come up because it's not as easy as
click it and go.
Or it depends on the person who's explaining. Some people are really good at bullet points and pound for pound, this is exactly what happened, but not every, you got to understand too, when you're explaining something to thousands of people who are parents of these children, a message or the detail is going to get lost in the sauce somewhere in there. And so to go in their defense, it's not an easy task either. Right.
I think there was some stuff I think a lot of people using Zoom. Zoom went down like during like the first day of like a lot of people's school day. So it was like that made an extra disaster on top of a disaster.
The best part about technology, they say that it's great. It's technology. It's it's the best thing. The worst thing about technology is that it's technology. It's the worst thing, and because it can go both ways, right? It's the most wonderful thing, and it's the most terrifying thing if everything starts going haywire. Especially if you're not sure if things were saved on a hard drive properly or things like that, or it works. You know what I mean? But anyway, so. Here's another thing with the whole technology thing, and this guy brought up, it was like part of the conference call that they had with all the parents and stuff like that. And he brought up a great point. He said, my daughter knows everything. We don't have like a touchscreen laptop at home. We don't have a touchscreen anything at home. We have just a regular old school laptop. Might have been even like a notebook or a netbook. What are they called?
Yeah, some of that.
Like one of these Chromebook things, but not like the touchscreen ones.
Yeah.
And now you're giving my 6-year-old a iPad. She might adjust fast. I don't know, but is there like a learning curve here? Like, how do I prepare someone? Maybe they didn't have the finances to afford something like that, and they can't really prepare your kid.
Just throwing higher. Well, I mean, a different type of technology at them that they're not used to.
It was a great question. And with that, and then the single parent thing came through, and then all of a sudden you start hearing all these questions. You started to realize everyone is facing some kind of difficulty with this whole transition. Just to go back though, on the first day post, it was incredible to see even parents who are teachers for not their kids but for other grades or other school districts possibly. They were even struggling with their children's stuff when it came to technology wise, I should say. Like I said, the people were like, well, that was a complete disaster of a day, but we figured it out. We send a couple text messages, we send a couple emails, phone calls, whatever, and I'm sure their emails were getting bombarded. So once all that kind of got situated, they're kind of up and grooving. It's just like anything, right? Let's be honest. It was kind of like when we all went from flip phones to smartphones. And yes, there was a little pushback, a resistance. There's going to be a little bit of resistance there, right, in that transition. There's a learning curve, of course. And maybe this was something, hopefully, we can look back at and say, wow, I mean, that was definitely a learning experience, and hopefully we can turn it into something positive. Right now, we're still in the beginning stages. It's kind of bizarre. Everything is strange. And here's why I think the whole thing is off, crazy, right? Like it's just wild. Is because it happened unexpectedly. I think that's more of what it is than a thing that's forced, as the school districts have been talking about this for the last 5 years and in preparation of transitioning to a virtual school, right? And it's like, no, this was all just kind of forced down your throat because they're trying to deal with the situation themselves. Again, you really can't blame them. I'm not saying that every school district dealt with it perfectly, but I'm saying it's not easy. And like we said, there's thousands of students that they have to help go through this transition.
Yes.
And they're not trying to lose students over this, right? And so I'm pretty sure that they are trying their best to accommodate everyone in the best, way, shape, or form. Here's another thing. My wife and I have, employers that are very flexible and understanding. That is not always the case with everybody. Some people, you have to be at work. Like, that's it. It's do or die.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing. There's trades where if you don't show up to work, you don't get paid. Like, literally. There's no PTO day, right? There's no sick day. And so you have those folks, right, who are dealing with that, who may or may not have to take off the day to help transition their child for at least the first week or so. And, maybe a couple days they had to take off and take it from there. So you have that whole, group of folks who that definitely cannot be easy. And then, like I said, and for the healthcare workers, your whole entire day had that additional, or still has that additional stress because of
just the environment.
What the pandemic is.
Yeah.
It's a virus, and it's human centered, and then the spread, and then you can start like panicking, thinking like, oh my God, I don't want to bring this home to my family and whatever.
Yes.
So you have like these added stressors on top of, now I got to figure out this whole school thing. Because here was the thing. It wasn't like in March they're saying, oh, prepare to go virtual in September. Like, I don't care what anyone says. If someone said that was just either they're predicting the future, they knew something we didn't know, but not everyone was saying that. No. And so they were kind of stringing us along with a little hope here, a little hope there.
There was constant back and forth of, of there being in-person classes, which obviously schools in general, whether it be, grade school or college, it seems like an unmitigated disaster. But in terms of like not people prepared, even though it seems like it should have been prepared, like it should have been like some kind of talk of almost being completely 100% you're virtual to begin with. At least that should have been like you have an ABC plan. That should have been like some portion of that, some portion of it of maybe we can't bring people back into the school building at all. Yeah,
I could tell you, and if someone did, good for you. But I could almost guarantee the majority of people did not.
No, absolutely not.
How do you think the kids will take it?
It probably depends on what level you're at. I mean, and it depends on, because I know some of my coworkers, they have children all grade levels. One's like third or fourth grade, and one's like high school and stuff like that.
Yeah. So
it's like high school's easier because obviously you know the routine. You can log in. You have the ability to log in and comprehend everything that's going on. So you understand what's going on. You can go to classes and you understand that aspect. When you have third, fourth grade, or obviously James first grade, that's a way different experience because you're not used to that. One and two is like sometimes it's hard enough for teachers, I think, to keep the kids in check normally. It's like because they're kids, they're 5, 6, 7 year olds, whatever. They're trying to be. They're going to be kids. I mean, in a school environment, it's probably. I'm sure it's different. But you're at home. You're comfortable, and you get a little, easy with the technology. It's like, the video's on. I'm going to go run around or something like that. Some kids
100%.
And it's like, so I'm sure it's a harder transition to just stay at home and like be mandated to be sitting in front of a computer at quote unquote school all day long. When you come home, is to I guess whatever your after school stuff and playtime and all that, whatever. I don't know.
I'm just like, I'm like going through my process, myself, and you nailed it. I think it's more of the older. I think, again, I'm not a teenager and a student at this point, and how I'm handling it. I think the schooling is one thing, right? But I think there's that social aspect that is going to be way different and just not there. It's just a missing link.
Sure. Well, I think to some degree, I mean, some parts of that are in play because, I mean, obviously, when we were in school, there wasn't like FaceTime and all that. Some people used to doing that. Like, they're kind of virtual, like, socializing. That's anyway. True. Obviously, people have games, stuff they talk to and all that, like, or, some...
Social media. We didn't have social media growing up.
None of that existed. Yeah, so obviously school was where you saw your friends, where you hung out, whatever, for a little bit afterwards, and you came home and, did whatever. But, so there's some version of that, at least the older kids understand, like, school, like, I know James, like, oh, like my best friends and stuff like that, and he's like, he's not going to be able to do that every day. And I'm sure, obviously, he just got some kind of technology, whatever. So he's do that, but I don't know if he has the ability to do all like FaceTimes and all that stuff, whatever. Or even his friends have that because they might be different levels of responsibility.
Yes, of
being able to withhold that kind of technology without breaking and all that stuff, whatever.
Of course.
So it's like it depends on level of maturity and all that stuff, whatever. How they're gonna handle that part of it.
Yeah, and I think it creates different environments. And what about the environment that's not healthy already to begin with at home?
Yeah.
What if the home environment isn't a safe place for a kid, and now they're forced to be there?
Sure.
Unfortunately, and then what then? And there's situations. That's what I'm saying. Like, I know we're missing a million different scenarios here, and I apologize if we miss yours. That's not the intent. Our intention is to say that there are a bunch of scenarios, whether we mentioned them or not, and everyone brings its own bag of difficulty and its challenges to overcome. And whether it's the parents, the child, the parents and the children combined, there is stress that this adds that is unprecedented. And I'm not saying that we can't go through it, and I'm not saying there of course there's going to be growing pains, and I'm not saying that we're sitting here crying like a bunch of babies. But like I did mention previously, is that this was just put on us. It wasn't like it was like a thing where we can choose. Well, we couldn't anyway in our situation.
Because I know, there was some schools that I heard that like you had the option to whether do at least start off remotely, because I think that was the initial option was
right.
Oh, you start off remotely until like October, or whatever, the first couple months of whatever school was, and then you, I guess, transition back into school or something like that.
That's the plan. But they've also said that this is all going to be situated, months ago. And so is this another way of, just stringing us along just to whatever and transition to whatever they actually have planned for this?
Yeah. And we were all supposed to quarantine for a couple of weeks, so.
Right. And so you accept it in the beginning. That's what I'm trying to say. And so it's like acceptable.
Yes.
But if someone said, we got to do this for the next 6 years, you're going to have a different reaction than if someone says, first 6 months or, whatever, first semester, first marking period, whatever they call it. It's just totally different.
Yes, 100%. It's like, because it's funny, because obviously we went to college and stuff. It's funny that like remote learning was a luxury.
Yeah.
And now that's you have no option but to do that.
Right.
Because even like colleges are like that too. It's like everything's they try to start off with in-person class, and obviously just like the grade schools that became a whole disaster.
Yeah, I mean, of course there's ton of private schools and stuff like that that they have the ability to go in and whatever because they have it figured out, maybe because they're the numbers, the student numbers are lower than your typical public school or whatever. So they some people are not affected at all, I guess. I believe it depends on the guardians of the children, parents and guardians, the person who is actually going through the experience with the child, and the child themselves, because sometimes, maybe some kid, this is his dream. This is all he ever wanted. He just wanted to wake up, walk over to his desk or his computer or whatever, go to school, and like that he's done, and he or she is done. And maybe this is all they ever wanted, right? And so, of course, there's people out there who are loving this. Yeah. And I'm not saying that it's 100% a negative thing. No. I do think that we can learn from it. I do think that there's aspects of this. I also do think that in this learning environment, this type of learning environment, it's stretching us to become again, a better version of ourselves in a sense, to adaptability.
Yes.
Right. And having the, like I said, this situation was kind of put on us instead of us choosing it. Right. And now you have to adapt.
You have to work within the
and
confines
and this whole survival of fittest thing starts coming back almost like into like real light right in front of your face, even though it's kind of there. This is like in your face. And I truly do believe it creates a larger divide in our society. I truly do. Beyond the schooling part, and this is what I always say, college isn't all necessarily about the education. Obviously, that's the big part, and you want to, successfully get the experience that you need for you, whether that's getting a degree or not getting a degree or leaving after the first marking period or semester or whatever, or staying for the however many years it takes you. That's not my, I think every individual is on their own path. I feel the same way with spirituality. It's not my job to judge that, right? Sure. But whatever that experience, is, I say it's more than just the schooling. For me, college was, yes, I went to Temple University, loved Temple University, loved the city of Philly, right? But obviously the people I met, priceless, right? But that experience of living on my own, although it's in a bubble, you're in a bubble. When you're in a dorm room, I'm sorry, you're not really living on your own, bro. This is a bubble, okay? And you'll realize that once you get out of that bubble, you're like, holy smokes, I kind of had it made still.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? More so if you have full rides or, you know, scholarships of some sort. But if you know you're paying, you know, for college yourself or whatever, you yourself, not your parents had it all saved up and paid for. I'm saying at one point you're going to owe that, you're going to have this tremendous debt, right? That's what I'm saying. The approach to everything changed. The way I view money changed. The way I view relationships changed. The way I handled just life in general completely changed. That was all the experience. The education was a whole other thing, which I also gained, obviously, right? Sure. And all the knowledge. And so that's part of me is kind of like what's they're being stripped from. Yeah. And hopefully this is temporary, but I do feel like even if it's just on recess, James being able to hang out with kids his age. Yes. You know what I'm saying? Just even if they're running around playing tag, or running around playing baseball or basketball or whatever. That has been taken from them. And that's what kills me more, because it's like, it's more than the education. The experience is just eating lunch is, you learn so much of what people eat, what they pack, you know, and it's like the conversations you have over food, and it kind of almost develops like this thing on who we then become later on in life. You know what I'm saying? And
expands his obviously mind frame outside of always seeing mommy, daddy, and you know your brother and sisters and stuff like that. So.
Right, exactly. And I, you know, and it kind of like the same thing, kind of that prep, right? That prep, like you get up early in the morning, and it's just a routine. And maybe the routine and how we look at things obviously has to change, because this whole thing is just completely different. You know, and going back to the whole parent thing and the stressors that are on them. What about the business owners, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's business owners who lost their businesses, who dang near lost their businesses throughout this process,
sure.
who are completely struggling, whose income went to half, a fourth, a fifth, a eighth, whatever. Those people have kids. Those people have families. You know what I'm saying? And so you know, not everyone has the ability to just quickly transition into this. And that's what I'm trying to say is this whole survival of the fittest thing, you kind of have to scramble and figure it out. And you have to. It's really, you don't have a choice. That's what I'm saying. It's forced on us. And now it's like, if you don't figure it out, you know, now you're a failure for something that was technically not your fault. So to kind of switch gears a little bit, do you think this is sustainable? Do you think virtual schooling will be something forever? Do you think certain schools will just keep this transition? Some will go back to regular, you know, on-site schooling? Do you think that they'll do the schedule, like the AB schedule, where it's like 3 days on-site, you know, 2 days virtually?
That seems like the most, at least in the near future, that seems like the most likely solution, I guess. Yeah. I guess if once things get under control.
Yeah.
I mean, virtual schooling is probably an eventuality of, you know, down the line, but not when it's thrust upon that you know have to figure it out on the fly.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would assume even like obviously like we both work in healthcare, it's like telemed is like, I mean, that was always kind of around, but it's a lot more ubiquitous now than it ever was before. So it's like, it seems like those types of at least partial in and out seems to be the most imminent. I guess.
Absolutely. I think it's huge too. I think we're at a crucial time in parenting, where your child is seeing you more than ever handle stress, probably more than ever. I mean, of course, there's different kinds of situations, and not everyone's, you know, situation is the same. And so I think it's very important to highlight the importance of our approach, regardless of it's our fault or not. But the card that we're dealt to do the best to appropriately play that card to the best of our ability. Yeah. Listen, we're not all going to make the right decisions. We're not all going to, you know, have the best approach or make, you know, or say the right things all the time. But I think it's important to at least highlight it and bring it to the forefront, to raise an awareness that your children are watching you, listening to you, and very carefully, because now they're more sensitive than ever to everything.
Yes.
And I think it's a crucial moment in time in parenting would be my tip, I guess, to say to all the parents out there, you probably already thought of this. I'm just saying, for, maybe someone's about to have a child now and it's not something that they necessarily are thinking about. At times like this, or times of crisis, everyone's emotions and feelings are hypersensitive, whether that's good or bad. They just are hypersensitive. So they're super sensitive to what is going on. But what I would say is they're watching your every move way more than ever, because they see everyone around them panicking. They see everyone around them complaining. They see everyone around them move different. And so if you're going to move different, if you're going to approach different, just have the understanding or the awareness, the heads up that your kids are watching, because they're going to be a future version of you, hopefully better. That's what I always pray for, that my kids can stand on my shoulders and then start their beautiful lives. But I just felt the need, or the compulsion to say that. I don't know why. It was just like on my mind, and it might have been a situation that happened at my own house that made me think. I'm like, wow.
I mean, that's kind of stuff we talk about all the time anyway, in terms generalities of like, everybody in general are watching you, but now it's your children who you have the hugest influence on. Now you are home a lot more with them just because of the situation it is. So it's like, so it's understandable that I guess it needs to be emphasized to some degree.
Yeah.
Because I mean, those are the ones you're really, forming for the future.
Yes. One of the biggest things was school shopping this year. And so we didn't need, we needed school supplies, obviously. You needed things, right? You needed supplies, but it just wasn't the same. Because now my wife's with this thing where if one of us home and there's no real true need to bring the kids along, we could just leave them with whatever parent that's there, whether it's myself or her. Where typically it'd be like, if we're going shopping for them, whatever, let them come along and pick out, certain things. And this year was more of kind of like, we still didn't know kind of really what to expect. So we got like bare minimum things, and we're trying to like have him, give him a say in, certain things, and a color of a folder. But it still was different, right? And it's just off.
Even like with, like always like towards the middle of the summer, it's like, back to school sales and stuff. Yeah. It seemed like that was,
non-existent.
Yes, it was like whatever stuff, like you watch dinner, like TV during dinner and stuff like that. It was like, or around that time, you see at least more of the commercials. It seemed like it happened in a split second, and it was like back to school sale, and that was it. It was like you saw like a couple commercials, and that was like a very short period of time, and it was weird.
I just think what the official word was going to be, that it just constantly it's constantly changing every single day. And so that's where we're just like, well, let's just get the minimum stuff, like whatever the list is, we'll get it. But typically we kind of get like 2 of everything, and 3 of this and 4 of that, and it was like, dang, I remember, like last year or whatever it was, like you had to help bring in, like everyone was pitching in for tissues. And so we had to bring in like boxes of tissues for, 5 boxes of tissues, so your kid would have it at least for the semester or whatever. It was like little things like that. Obviously it's good in the sense that you don't have to spend the money on it, but still it was like you just felt that there was something missing.
Yes, there was a little bit of those little enjoyments, I guess, of like, the new little milestones and stuff like that too, of like, going to a new grade, or getting a new book backpack or whatever it is, all your new stuff.
And same thing with the even with the backpack, we showed him backpack like online. And he's like, but like I still went and got it. Like he didn't go with me. You know what I'm saying? Like I went and got it. And his lunchbox, and it was just, and then I just gave it to him. He's like, "Oh, this is awesome!" Like he loved it, but the experience was so different than what my entire life I've known. I've always gone. My son, my James, obviously it hasn't been that long, but he came with us anytime we went shopping because it's for him. We want him to pick it out. I want to have fun. It's an experience. Whole family. And,
going back to what you're saying, like the social thing, I was like, you got a new lunchbox, and like, we show your kids, what superhero, whatever it is on the box, and like, get all excited about it, and then that is now gone to whatever too.
Right. And so you have all that stuff that's just like, and maybe hopefully this is just like an awkward like year or whatever. And I don't know if that was the best approach. I don't know. Everything is so new. We're just honestly just doing the best that we can for what the situation is. And we're trying to keep, not to overreact on things. We're trying to keep like a cool head as much as possible, because I don't know what the quote, norm is for everyone, because everyone's norm is different. But this is definitely changing our everyday lives.
Yes.
In a major way. And so whether it's trying to keep things, quote, as normal as possible through the transition, I think that's what's most healthiest. I do. I'm not saying that we don't change everything. Maybe we do have to change everything, and maybe we will. But I think it's important that through the transition, be at least as abrasive as possible.
Yes. Well, because it's setting a foundation for whatever new version of like that normal is going to be.
Yeah. And maybe that in itself is a bad approach. I don't know. What if, a cold change just like that, the snap of a finger, is what's needed? Yeah. Or what should the lessons be? I don't know. Again, that's just a parenting style, and I feel like that's up to everyone else's. That's to everyone's discretion as to what your approach is. Yeah. But what I was mentioning earlier is, as much as possible, put in your child into consideration with these decisions that you're making, the things that you're saying, how you're approaching things and acting around them. It's affecting them the same way. If your kid goes to school and there's a kid who's not so nice and they start to become friends, all of a sudden your kid's throwing the spitballs and chucking breaking pencils over someone's leg or whatever it is, and you're like, what is going on? Where did you learn this from? It's kind of the same thing when everyone's seen the little kid walk around and say a bad word.
Sure.
And you're like, dude, you're not even in school. Yeah. Obviously, you learned that at home. You know what I'm saying?
You become your own bad influence.
Right. And it's like, it's a chin check for everybody.
Sure.
It really is. You kind of got to look in the mirror yourself, and it's like, understand that your child is also going through this.
Don't hang out the wrong crowd, but the only crowd is your parents.
And so the future is who knows, but I think that's my biggest thing is, keep your spouse, on your mind and try to keep everything as healthy as possible. Keep your children on their mind, and those people around you, man. You don't know what people are going through, whether it's financially, relationally. Some people probably got divorced over this. Some people probably split up over this. Businesses were lost. Lives were obviously lost, which is, it's even a more horrific thought.
Yes.
And everyone's going through something.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to be mindful, right? And just to notice that. And that's it. As long as you notice it and you're mindful, and just be kind. This is a very stressful time for everyone involved. I don't care if you thought you had everything figured out. This thing is so unpredictable that even if you had everything figured out up till now, tomorrow might throw you for a loop. You know what I mean? So be grateful for what you have. Put love on everyone, that's around you. Be kind. We will get through this. It's not going to be easy. It hasn't been easy. Sure. It's definitely a major transition and shift in humanity for sure. It's a world issue. It's a worldwide issue. And so we're hoping that the shift is something towards something positive. And if we kind of keep the thoughts in that light, I think together we'll overcome. Everyone do their role, play their part. I think we'll be all right. All right, so with that being said, we like to wrap things up with quotes, and the first one is by Alan Watts. The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. And the second one is from Aristotle. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an action, but a habit. New School. In this episode, the crew covers topics that range from virtual schooling, scheduling, learning and teaching, the coronavirus, and much more. We wrap the episode up with quotes from Alan Watts and Aristotle. Awesome. Guys, thanks again for joining us. The Rotated Views podcast was produced for self-development purposes. Huge shout out to our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by the Blessed Lifestyle brand. That is BL3SSED.com. Also sponsored by The Motivation Files Unleashed. This motivational mixtape will be your fuel for success. Available on all platforms. Guys, don't forget to visit the website, JimmyleeVelez.com. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Rotated Views. If you have any inquiries or questions, email us at info@JimmyleeVelez.com. On behalf of myself and the rest of the crew, we wish you massive success. Stay blessed.